For coming along to this evening. Very excited not only to be here in the yard, this beautiful space, it's quite incredible, and very excited to be talking to Saskia Marjoram, founder, creator, designer of, I'm sure you all know, Saskia Flower Essences, which are natural remedies, handmade here in the UK to help with behaviour and
emotional issues mostly.
Emotional issues, exactly. Yeah. And our topic of today, when I said, do you want to come and do a talk with me? What are we going to talk about through all the different things, is the energetic healing properties in plants. But before we get to that, because there's so much to get to before we actually get to that, is your story really, and how you came to be this kind of, I call you some sort of white witch with these magic potions that really do, can really help one get on. It's a fast track to just a calmer state and happier well-being, really,
I think
isn't it?
I'm not always calmer.
Yeah, not always calmer.
Sometimes let's just get on with it.
Let's just get on with it.
Yes, that's when I discovered flower essences. What was amazing was they just kind of kept you on track.
Yeah,
they just kind of, you're veering off. It's like friends reminding you that you're going to do your exercises every morning, or you're going to do your yoga, or you're going to do your whatever. They're just like, okay.
It's incredible. I remember when I came about them very through a friend of mine, and had nothing to do with Vigour and Skills at the time, and it was the Calm and Protect, and I didn't even think about it, but for sort of weeks I just woke up, had a shower, and the first thing I'd do was just spray this essence, and overnight there was just a different attitude, a different kind of ferocity to life, and I'm the last person to really be on track, this kind of this knowledge, to have this information, so I became quite intrigued, and then obviously didn't recently. But your story is incredible because it really is it's a rite of passage just from talking to you. Like, your destiny's been just, and it's beautiful how it's all come about. But it begins in Stroud.
Yes, Gloucestershire, where I grew up. Yeah, and basically, I needed essences. I didn't know what they. Well, I did know what they were. If anyone knows Stroud, it's quite an alternative, known for quite an alternative outlook on things, and it's always been the forefront of new alternative remedies. It was quite high on the Steiner. There was a local Steiner school, and my parents moved there in the 60s when I was really small, and they were my dad was a campaigner, peace campaigner and stuff. So I was kind of brought up with these. With an outward or an alternative way of thinking about things, of questioning things and working out, stuff myself, rather than following the line that you've fed, some of us. But yes, we needed essences. And it kind of, so whereas I was going with that, I was going with, just that I had heard of essences, but I hadn't taken much notice of them. There were people I knew who were like bark essence practitioners, but it was quite, then so we're talking kind of the end of the last century, which sounds like a really long time ago. It kind of was a long time ago now, more than 20 years ago. In fact, this coming April would have been 20 years when we made our first essence. But yes, so like the end of the last century, it was quite interesting to think how life has changed since then, and how people's ideas have changed since then, and kind of why. It really kind of, it's had to happen, and technology obviously leads loads of stuff. But we're thinking back that long ago, how different things were. I mean, we didn't even have mobile phones, internet, any of those things really.
Well, you still went to a library when you wanted to research something, or the internet cafe was like the closest thing to sort of like this digital world that we had no idea.
We didn't have internet.
How quickly that was going to kind of take over. But I guess probably without our minds were more.
Yes, which again, in lots of ways, takes us further away from nature. So the essences have really got into nature. Yeah.
You have a natural. You've been sort of born into nature. I mean, your first job, if we can go back before the essences sort of came about, your sort of entry into the world of, I guess you could say, gardening, nature. You were living at home, and it was under the sort of premise of an ultimatum. Your mum said, go get a job, and you ended up blacking your way into it.
Yeah, and I lived in the countryside, so I was aware of nature, and I was always one of those girls who asked the name of plants and did press flowers, and I gave out birthday cards with my sticky back plastic and my cow slips in or whatever. So I was always interested in plants. My dad was a gardener professionally, and my mother's mother, my granny, she was a keen gardener, what I would call a real gardener. Rather than my dad just did it as a job. He was a politician, this being. But yes, so I wasn't really that interested in, or didn't appear to be. But anyway, I was living at home for a bit after having a spat with my boyfriend, I think. And after a couple of weeks, said, well, if you're going to carry on living here, you've got to go and get a job. So I just went down the job centre, and there was a job that was odd job person and gardener for Prince Michael of Kent, which I could walk to from home because it was just up the hill. If you live in Gloucestershire, there's quite a lot of royals spread out.
It's quite a first job though. I mean, it's going into like the nitty-gritty of,
It kind of was, but again, I didn't really think about it like that. I just thought, well, gardening is not that hard, is it? I'm sure I can convince them I can do gardening, and odd jobs, I'm quite practical, you know. So I just kind of went in my youthful naivety and just blagged my way into this job. And then they suddenly said, so can you weed that border then? And I was like, oh my God, which ones are the weeds? And I'm still like that. I'm not quite sure which ones are weeds and which ones are meant to be plants. And lots of weeds are in my garden now, what people know as weeds anyway. But yeah, so that was in. It was kind of like fairyland. It was kind of 16 acres of garden right on top of the hill, and they were there. They were only there at weekends, so I had me and this other guy. We had the place pretty much to ourselves for.
Amazing.
And I was walking through the woods every day, and suddenly it was like, oh my! It just felt like being home. You know, just working with the plants on that level, on the physical level, and that's kind of where my story starts, I guess, in a way, in that. I knew I got to know the plants like hands in. You know, I knew what their roots felt like and what they smelled like and whether the stems were hairy or stiff or those kind of things, which when it comes to essences and finding out what an essence is for is quite useful. But we'll probably get onto that later.
Get onto that later. Because then from one sort of incredible job, you then go on to, what I find incredible is that there's no sort of, you learned on the job, that there's confidence to learn.
Again, I don't know if it was actually confidence. I think, and I have definitely become more confident since taking the right essences. I wasn't a confident person in general, although from the inside, other people might have seen it differently from the outside. But yes, it kind of, I've always just followed the path that just appeared in front of me. I never, you know, luckily I didn't have desperate financial needs, but it wasn't key. You know, I was quite happy living in a shed, you know, someone's garden shed or whatever. It wasn't like I need to earn 15 grand a year, otherwise I'm going to die kind of thing. So I wasn't financially led. And we had the dole then as well. That was another thing, meant you didn't have to work. You could just get your £80 a week or however much it was they gave you, go and sign on. The good old days. But so I did the Prince Michael thing, and then I had my children, and then so I was just doing odd job gardening for people and got really bored of gardening. So I had a cut flower patch. One day I said, I'm a bit bored of sweeping people's patios for £6 an hour or whatever it was I was doing. I'm a bit fed up of this gardening thing. And a woman said, so what do you like doing? And I said, what I really like doing is picking flowers from my garden and giving them to people as presents. And that was the first thing that came to me when she said, what do you really like doing? And she said, well, do that then. We've got a bit of land. You could just grow flowers there and sell them. So I just went on and did that. I had like where it's cool and trendy now. Lots of people do it. But I had a kind of veg box scheme. So they'd get a weekly bunch of whatever was available, and I'd deliver it in my little car with my kids in the back and whatever. And but that kind of got to just doing bunches. And one day I said to a friend of mine, I said, what I really need to take this further, what I really need some floristry experience, you know, because either in a shop or events or something, because I'm just doing bunches, and really I could be doing weddings or, you know, taking this further. She was at a party one day and said to a friend of hers that she kind of had half forgotten she knew, so it came across her, and she said, what are you up to now? And she said, I've become the florist for the Prince of Wales. And she said, oh, well, how's that? And she said, oh my God, it's so much work and I'm so exhausted, and it's really hard, you know, tiring doing banquets is really tiring. Being a florist for the royal, you know, doing royal banquets is really tiring. So she said, you need my friend Saskia Marjoram. And she said, well, with a name like that, she better give me a ring. So I did, and then I became the assistant florist to the Prince of Wales, now king, I guess.
But again, it's quite a sort of, I don't want to say at this point you've got a niche client. I mean, you're working for, it's amazing how it's always the royal family. I don't know why it sort of just happens to be. Are they local?
Well, they were local, but I think it must be like a past life thing, because I've also got like a modern art connection. Like it's either royalty or modern art people I work for, neither of which are my natural leanings. So I guess there must be a connection there sometime, and I often think it must be like past life stuff. I can't think what else it is. But and that's what fascinates me with essences, is where the humans and people meet, and people's stories, are constantly, that's what keeps me going, and finding them the right flowers to help them become their biggest version of themselves, really, or their best version of themselves, or they're kind of bringing them back to their true version of themselves. All the stuff that we've kind of built up as kind of clothes over the top, or behavior patterns that we've picked up along the way, the essences can really help shift that. And that's kind of, it seems like that's kind of the core, really.
This is a question I want to ask later on, but I'm worried about forgetting, so I'm just going to mention it because we'll go on to it. But do you think that compared to when you started 20 years ago to now, it's become a very different, each person's a bit more difficult to get to based on how much noise there is around us now compared to 20 years ago? And is it that, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say in the last 20 years, but definitely since the bark flower remedies. So it's quite a valid point in how life has changed. And with the bark flower remedies, which were invented in the 1930s by he was actually a doctor, Dr. Barch. We could have discussions about how you pronounce his name, but I call him Dr. Bark. And because it's like trees. But anyway, he was a doctor and a homeopath, and in the 1930s it was quite normal to be a homeopath and a doctor at the same time, I think. But life was quite different then, and his essences are very archetypal in the way they're described, and so therefore what people think they are for. They are still an oak tree, and an oak tree, one of the essences is oak, and an oak tree is still an oak tree, but the human description that someone's given it is quite stuck in my opinion, is quite stuck in how it's described. But yeah, even from 20 years ago, as I said, life's changed so much. It's like, and the issues we've got to deal with are incredible, and the new beings coming onto the planet have got their own. They're here to help us evolve, and they're finding the society that we've set up for them quite difficult to handle. So there's lots, the neurodiversity coming in. The essences are really helping with that. But yeah, just, and all the Wi-Fi and the, like we were saying, the technology and getting somewhere, and it's like, oh my God, there's no signal, what are we going to do? We can't post on our Instagram or whatever. And it's like, that didn't used to be a thing. And just dealing with that on a day-to-day, everyday level is quite stressful. It's quite busy and feels quite like tight. That you kind of feel like this weight of, expectations about all sorts of things.
Yeah, expectations are crazy these days. But you're going back to your story, when we speak to many of the makers in Vigour and Skills, there's this aha moment when the transition happens. What was your sort of the light bulb moment of going, okay, wait a minute, I've been doing flowers, gardening, I'm in nature all the time, but now you go on to this next level, which is the essences. Yeah,
and again, the essences wasn't a plan. There wasn't a plan. We just came across the essences because we were in crisis. Me and a friend of mine, Christine, she trained as a homeopath, and she is a big part of the story. Though we don't do it together anymore, but I've been looking back at some old photos recently for an article someone wanted to write, and I was looking back over these photos and remembering all the, all the stuff we'd done together. And it was a bit, we did it together. We were friends, and we were mums together, and she used to pick my kids up, and I used to look after her son, and those kind of things. And so I'd already started doing the Prince of Wales thing, and I was still carrying on some of my gardening jobs, and I had 2 children, and I had a relationship that was a relationship. We all have stuff with our relationships, but it was getting to a tricky stage, and I was running 3 jobs and getting up and hitting the ground running. And she said she'd come across the Australian bush flower essences, which some of you might have heard of. And she said, I've heard about these essences, and I think they could be really useful for us, getting the kids to school and, sorting out their stuff and our own stuff. And so we bought them. They were available in Neil's yard, and they used to have the whole range there. And they didn't change our lives overnight, but I would say within 2 or 3 months, we were back on track. That thing of coming back on track, of like, okay, I can deal with this, whatever the problem with the child sorted out, they're not doing that thing anymore, they're managing better at school, I'm being able to express my needs to my partner better, we're having clearer boundaries, we're getting on again. And it was like, there was no denying they worked. It was like some people, when they take essences, they notice either straight away, depending on their sensitivity, or how long the issue has been happening for. But yeah, and some people don't notice it's kind of subconscious, but they'll just look back a few months later and go, oh, I'm not doing that thing anymore. I've forgotten, I don't do that. I don't do that thing of interrupting people or having trouble just concentrating on what someone else is saying or saying no to people or whatever it is. But yeah, we noticed quite quickly that they worked. But they were made from Australian plants, which I didn't have. Being a gardener and a florist, I've been working on a practical level with plants and working with their energy probably on all the time, but without consciously thinking about it. But yes, I did have some knowledge of some other plants, but I didn't know them. Like I knew the dandelions and the buttercups and the oak tree and that lived down the road and those kind of things. And so I had to keep looking up what they did in the book and saying, oh, we've got a problem, how do we solve it? And so they didn't really feel natural to me. And also they weren't desperately cheap for someone who's on a low income, and we weren't quite hand to mouth, but it was pretty much. So we don't, you go into the shop and go, we need that one, and that one. It was like, oh, do we really? So anyway, so we were reading up in the book about how, everything that Ian White, who made the essences, had to say. And there was a page that said how to make a flower essence, which Edward Bark again had explained how to make an essence. And the process is really, really simple. So we thought we'd give it a go. We were women who made croissants or, baked bread or tried, clothes or whatever. We were practical. And it was loads easier than making any of those things. Basically what you do is you have a glass bowl full of spring water, and you float the flowers on top of the water. And the sunshine kind of takes like an energetic photograph of the flowers and places it between the water molecules. The physics is catching up now, but there's a lot of scientific research about water memory and how water holds memory. And not really why, but it does. So that process of leaving the flowers in the sunshine transfers the energy to the liquid. And then when you've taken those flowers out, this liquid, energized liquid, you add it to alcohol. And so basically that's like when you fix a photograph. So when you take a photograph, if you leave it in the light, it just disappears, doesn't it? But you fix it and it stays there. So that's what the making an essence does. And then that liquid you dilute down a couple of times, not like homeopathy. With homeopathy, it's like 600 bottles down the line. And they start with the material matter. But with flower essences, it's like it's being diluted to the right concentration so a human can hear the vibration. They can feel it in their bodies. So when you take that liquid into your body or spray it with the mist, we'll get onto that later.
Can't wait to go with that.
When you take that water into your body, that liquid into your body, all the water in your body recalibrates to that vibration. A bit like when vibrational medicine, I've again been talking about it for 20 years, but when you say vibrations, people go, oh, that sounds really wussy. It's like, oh, really, vibrations? And I'm saying, well, if you play a record on a record player, that's the vibration in someone's voice that stayed in that bit of plastic for 50 years sometimes. And when you listen back to that vibration going through, off the record player, through the air, into your ear, and then changes how you think, how you feel, can change your whole day hearing the right piece of music, can bring you to complete tears. For various reasons. And so, that is just a vibration. So if you can actually take that vibration into your body so that all the liquid in your body can feel that vibration, you're going to change, basically. And that's what essences do. And when you spray them on your body, you absorb them through your skin. Someone told me the other day that some small molecules take 26 seconds from landing on your skin to getting into your bloodstream.
Wow.
Which kind of like, when you start thinking about like natural cosmetics or anything, putting your kids in, petrochemical bubble bath or whatever, baby lotion, all these kind of things, you kind of go, okay, going straight in.
Go straight into the blood.
Yeah.
That is quite scary. When you began then, so obviously this, this journey of sort of learning on the job and sort of training yourself, how did you get it out to people then? How did you, did you knock on a friend's door? Did you test it out on friends and family? You did test it out.
Yeah. So anyway, we thought we'd quite easy process. There's the process. All you need is a glass bowl, the right flour, what flour we're going to make it from, and some bottles to bottle it up in, and maybe a label.
What was the first flower actually?
So we So we were like, okay, well, let's make our own then. Quite simple. We didn't think, let's make our own and have a business that's going to take over our lives and be the rest of my whole life's journey. But we were interested enough to think, okay, well, let's give it a go. And how hard is it? What's the worst that can happen? Those kind of thoughts. But the difficult bit was deciding what flower we're going to make our first essence from. And at the time, Christine's mother was ill in hospital. She was a very lovely and quite stern, upright, Quakerly lady with short cropped hair, and she was very thin, and she was called Nan, and she'd been a nurse, and she was a Quaker, and she did good deeds, basically. She was one of those really good people. Anyway, she was in hospital, and it happened that she was dying, but I think probably at the time no one really knew that she was dying, but I can't say that for sure. But anyway, someone had given her one of those little, it was springtime, and someone had bought from like the local spa or something in a plastic pot one of those pink and yellow polyanthus plants. You know, so it was kind of grown in probably not in kind of chemical soil, maybe under electric lights. It wasn't like in supreme nature or anything. But they'd given her this little pot plant. It was on her bedside table, and no one watered it because they were busy looking after her. But she kind of kept saying, apparently, couldn't you water the plant? But she didn't. Nobody did. Anyway, when eventually she died, sadly, they were clearing out all her stuff out of her room and handed Christine this pile of clothes and said, well, maybe you should take this plant with you. And she said the plant had come back to life. I mean, I still get shivers when she went now. And I was like, and as soon as she told me the story, I was like, that I knew, that was it. It was like it had Nan in it. Her name was Nan, which is why it's called Nan's Polyanthus, is one of our flower essences. Anyway, so she bought this little, so there were only like 4 or 5 little flowers on it. So we got our bowl of spring water and we put the flowers in it and we put it on the patio in the sun, and we weren't being cosmic or clean or clearing our auras or anything, you know, we just did it, bottled it up, gave it to women in the village who were our friends who we thought they might actually take it and come back with any information, and took it ourselves. But I wasn't like, oh my God, I wonder what that essence is going to do. It kind of bit like my life in general. It wasn't like, it kind of became the most important thing kind of ever really, but at the time it was just like, oh yeah, there's an essence, I'll try that. And it was only a couple of weeks later when I saw her, she said, oh, have you been taking that essence? Did you notice anything happened? And I was like, oh, actually, yeah, I've been really getting on with stuff. I've been like clearing out my cupboards, and I pruned all those apple trees yesterday, and da-da-da-da-da. And she said, oh yeah, I've been really busy as well. And then various women in the village all came back and went, oh my God, that essence, I've been really busy. I've been really getting on with cleaned out all my stuff, and I did my accounts, and I did this and did that.
Accounts?
I know. Well, that's,
Really,
if you need to get on with your accounts or your homework, honestly, it's in our Focus Energize Create blend, and it's still one of our best sellers because it really just does it without, it's not like you have to take loads of coffee. You just take your drops. A few hours later, you realise you've done it all. Brilliant. And so we were like really chuffed it had worked, but we were a bit upset that all we'd done is make something that would help people get on with their housework.
Yeah. Give me something more.
So we were like, okay. And essences, you know, and that's been one of our things all the way through is essences they can work on all levels. They can work on that level of just getting your accounts done, but they can also be, you know, for deep spiritual work or deep personal transformation. And so Christine, anyway, she said she sent it off to a friend of hers who was a psychic healer and thought, well, she'll come back with something. So not long after, she came back and said, well, it's quite simple, Christine. It's for things that you're having difficulty getting on with, and which could be like dying or doing your accounts. Or in one instance, this woman took it and marched in and told her husband she was leaving. But that won't happen to all of you. But it was just something that she'd been putting off and she hadn't found the courage to say it, or it had just been one of those things she thought, oh, well, it's not too bad, I'll leave it bumbling along, being not. And she just took the essence and was like, no, that's it, I'm not having this anymore. And so I did have to avoid him on the street for quite a long time.
Oh my gosh. Hey, you said something really lovely when we were talking on our Zoom, that you went from getting to know the characteristics of flowers to like their personalities. Like that all flowers have a personality, and obviously this is the vibration. Yeah. But do you learn about it? Is there like a book when you go learn about it before? Or are you learning it sort of on the job, per se? Because how, you know, we all know the rose, the romance. Daffodil brings this sort of conjures up this sense of joy for spring, but
Yeah.
what comes
Well,
first? How do you find out?
What comes first, the chicken or the egg? Yeah, you can't find it out. Well, you can find it out, and as I said, the bark remedies, his 38 ones, he well documented them. He wrote them down, and it's become a bit like the Bible in that this is what bark said, so this is what this essence does. But of course, they're much broader, and my way of so. From the physical coming into learning about their personality. So when you take a flower essence, it's got the vibration of that plant. But how we respond to it is by shifting our emotional and our behavioural issues, which can then lead down to healing physical stuff, but that isn't their main purpose, and we don't talk about that much, especially in this country, we're not allowed to. But they obviously, if your physical illness has been caused by a trauma or it has an emotional trigger, like your bad stomach or your heart palpitations or whatever, the stress, if you can take an essence, it's going to help with that. It's going to help your physical symptoms. But so dealing with the personalities of plants, and what I've realized over the years is the best way to think of flower essences as relationships. It's not you're not taking medicine, which you take 7 drops. Right, it's easy to think few drops twice a day or whatever. But if you think of them as having a relationship with that plant and building up a relationship plant, we don't, and that's how we work out what their personality is like. It's like, okay, if this was a human, how would it fit? What would it do? What's its personality? How does it express itself in this world? It's got its physical presence. But it's also, as you say, it's got a feeling. How do we? We all know that we respond to plants. You go to the garden centre, or you go into nature, and there's some you really love. There's that your favourite tree, or in the spring there's the the daisies in the field or whatever, and they all bring a different feeling to you. And that is their personality shining through. They have their physical herbal attributes. If you can use them as herbal medicine, and often they cross over. But yes, when you're dealing with flower essences, you are much more dealing with the personalities of the plants. So again, it's like getting to know a human. It's like you'll get the initial response to someone. You'll see what they look like, and whether you feel like you've got an attraction or a reaction to them. And then as you get to know them, you'll go in deeper. You'll discover that they're either friendly or not friendly, or they'll be physically
right for you, really.
Yeah, right for you. Or they'll be, you'll discover what jobs they've done, or whether they've got kids or not kids, or what they've done with their lives, and your relationship with it will build up over years, and it'll be in different levels, won't it? You meet someone for the first time and you get an initial response, and you kind of go, I like you, I don't like you, and you meet them again, and you get in deeper and deeper, and it can be years later. And again, it is with the essences, they're still surprising me. I'm still discovering something. I mean, I remember the guy I lived with for a long time, the father of my children, about 10 years after knowing him, I discovered he didn't believe in reincarnation. And I was like, oh, how did I never ever know that before? And again, with the essences, it wasn't a big deal, but it was just, I remember it just like really going, oh yeah, well, we can still, you'll know someone for a long time and discover they used to be an opera singer or something. And it is with the essences. There's still, each person they interact with, again, it can be a bit of a problem, but it's one of the great things about them is that with every person they come across, like the same with us, they respond different. Each person responds differently to that flower essence, and it is like a relationship. It brings out different qualities in you and it. In a way. Again, I'm going back to when we spoke, because I want to talk about that amazing sort of... You're going to talk about my still.
Just the still, because it's quite something, yeah. Health and well-being and the mental health, I do think that psychology plays a huge part, psychological well-being plays a huge part in physical health. I mean, as far as the common cold, I think there is, it was just something that happened recently. A friend of mine's daughter kept on suffering from these tummy aches. And I said to my girlfriend, who's in fact a healer, she does tapping, I said, the parents are trying to figure out if it's psychological or if she just got a tummy bug. And my friend said, well, of course it's psychological. But anyway, it might have turned out to be a tummy bug. And just the way she said that was that, well, of course it's all interlinked. And if you are sort of flowing or vibrating in the correct way for that, chapter in your life, then your body's going to function better. And when we spoke about that, I then went on to ask you, when's the last time you had the common cold? And you haven't been sick in a very long time, have you? Oh, sorry, I shouldn't sort of...
No, and again, when I do get ill, I know it's a clearing out. But it was something that shocked me, actually. It was during the pandemic that I read an article that said that if you are angry or scared, your immune system is knocked out for 6 hours, like pretty much down to zero. I mean, I could find the research on that, or you can find it online, but there's quite a lot of research on it. And so, of course, if we're kept in fear all the time by watching the news or being, scared of the pandemic, it's like, of course, we're going to be much more likely to get it. And I think probably my naivety that comes through in life in general is like, well, why would I get ill? And then my mum said, it's like, well, we're so bad with pain, there's no way we'd allow ourselves to get lever because we would just kill us. I get a headache and I'm like, kill me now. But I don't know how people deal with chronic pain. And obviously I do see in my practice lots of people who come in with physical stuff. But again, if you can take the right essences to support you or to give you hope that there's not a cure, but there's a way through it, even if that's a graceful death, they're really good to use alongside. And what's really good about them is that they don't interact with medication, so they're completely safe to take. The only thing that would happen if you took the wrong essence is it wouldn't do anything. And so you can give them safely to children, to animals, to anyone who's on any medication during pregnancy, breastfeeding, the whole thing, and they're not going to do anyone any harm. Because basically on a chemical level, they are just a bit of alcohol and spring water.
Yeah.
So it's like...
And that's the thing, it is the audience, children, animals, grown-ups, elderly,
yeah. And with children, they're really good because their patterns aren't so stuck. They're kind of long-term issues, and they're more used to change. They're not so scared of change as we are.
I know,
so they're not so resistant to change. So
I get jealous when I was watching my children. It's quick. It's just change a plan. They're in. It just happens.
Whereas me, I'm like, give me a few hours, I'll work it out.
Yeah, nightmare. But so the distilling process you've pretty much explained to us. But then this amazing contraption that we had at London Craft Week. How does this work? What is this?
Okay,
is this how...
there's a bit of a... I'm always a bit wary about talking about my still because it's the problem with flower essences being called flower essences is that often people confuse them with essential oils. So as soon as they see my still, that reinforces that problem. But I got into distilling about 7-8 years ago. A friend of mine who was living in France and teaching at a medicinal herb school in Lyon, I went and stayed with her, and one evening she said, should we get the still out and start distilling? And she lived in this kind of little kind of dark French house, like books everywhere and stuff and kids and whatever, quite chaotic, but it had a kind of definite atmosphere. And when she mentioned a still, I was just like, oh yes, can we? So we decided to distill mistletoe. And what I realized was, besides the fact that I just knew, it was just like coming home. It was like, oh my God, I've used one of these forever. It's like lifetime. I didn't have to query about any like technical stuff. It's like how hot it should be, how fast it should be. It was just like, okay, that's great. I know this. But what amazed me was, besides when you distill a plant in one of these alembic stills, is not only do you get all the aromatic compounds, which is where you get the essential oil, which float on the top. When you distill it, you get this liquid underneath, if you do have an oil, that's called a hydrosol or a hydrolat in French. And it doesn't contain the heavy, often the alkaloids don't come up through the still, but the liquid that comes out contains all the chemical compounds of the plant, basically. But not only that, so it has these incredible healing properties, the physical healing properties, but it contains the energy. It was almost pulsing, the liquids that came out when we did this mistletoe. I was like, oh, okay, it was quite witchy. I would say that's the kind of the word I would use. I'm not a fan of the word witch, because it carries so much weight with us, and we're kind of escaping the trauma from generations, I know. But it was definitely quite witchy. And so I was like, oh my God. So the first thing I thought of when I felt that they had their own energy was, what happens if we dilute these down like we do a flower essence, which is kind of a whole nother talk, I think. But yes, out comes this liquid, which besides that is very good for adding essences too. And then you can have mists and you can apply them topically. So you've got very pure, clean hydrosols, which I distill myself now. Within 10-mile radius, I can know where all the plants come from, and I do it myself at home, and then I make my mists up. So on a small scale, but I basically do it because I love the practicality of it, and it brings me back into practical. And these days I'm mostly dealing with humans and marketing and bottling and those kind of things that essences have come into, but the distilling I still love. And just, I mean, it's a bit of kit, it's so beautiful.
What's mistletoe? Sorry, just because you mentioned mistletoe.
Mistletoe.
And you think of mistletoe.
Yeah.
What would that be? What would I be looking for mistletoe?
In herbal medicine, you don't use the berries. The berries are poisonous.
Right.
But and I think it is one of those herbs that kind of medical herbalist should give out. Do you want to come in? No, right. So I'm not sure how safe it is if you were going to take a tincture or something of it. But as a hydrosol, it was perfectly safe, and it's very good for heart medicine. It's one of those plants that regulates your heart, either slows it down or speeds it up. I think hawthorn's the same. Herbalist would know there's a term for that. I'm not a herbalist, so I'm not sure, but I know it's a lot to do with heart medicine.
How many?
But energetically, it's obviously got this thing, hasn't it, with the it's it grows on other. It's not symbiotic. It's the other way around, isn't it? It's basically a sucking off the plant. It's a host plant.
Right.
Yeah. So it's got very interesting energetically. Me anyway.
So most people that come and see you in your office, studio, how would you call it?
At the moment it's a shop mostly.
It's a shop, yeah, shop. There we go.
I do have a consultation room. I draw my blinds, then it's a consultation
Doesn't
room.
sound like the shop. What is sort of, what is the most common reason people come and see you? Is it sleep? Sleep.
Yeah, and they don't necessarily always come to me, the people buy them online mostly. We wanted to make the essences easy for people, in the description stuff, easy for people to choose.
Sorry, that's me.
But we've turned an awful lot of people onto flower essences because they can't sleep. If people can't sleep, they'll try anything. They don't care how wacky it sounds. If it's only £12 a bottle, it's like, we'll give it a go. I mean, I had a couple who came into my shop one time, it was a year or so ago, and I wish I'd had my camera on, but unfortunately it was that mask time wearing. And they came in and they were complete converts. They were an elderly couple, not that age matters, but they weren't usual essence taking types, and they came from Bath, and they just came and they just spouted out at me about how amazing the flower essences were and how their whole lives had changed because now they can sleep. I mean, it is, luckily I don't suffer, but it is I don't know how you manage. I mean, I know when you're a young mum, you've got hormones to help you, but apart from that, it's just life is really hard if you can't sleep properly. So if you can take essences that aren't going to make you foggy in the morning and are just going to stop you worrying and help you relax and let go, it's brilliant.
Well, I do take your essences, and that's why, because sleep became such a sort of conversation in the last few years. I mean, I thought, is it because I'm a mum? Everyone's talking about sleep, how little they sleep, how much they sleep, and I remember thinking, I was sort of saying to my mum, she said, it's bizarre listening to all you guys. We never spoke about our sleep so much. You slept, you didn't. And I think it's the levels of anxiety and
the screens, obviously.
The screens
really don't help,
what happened to going to bed reading your book, and even if you go upstairs and say, I'm going to read my book tonight, I'm just going to quickly check my phone before I read the book, and then you've gone into this rabbit hole, or your work, your life depends on it, from your shopping, and I don't know, there's a lot more to worry about maybe nowadays than there was sort of a few years ago.
I don't think there's a lot more to worry about, but we're aware of it.
We're
aware of all the things to worry about. There have always been things to worry about, if you're a worrier.
But
you can worry about wearing the wrong socks.
Yes, that's true, exactly.
If you're a worrier, you can worry about anything.
But I don't worry about going to sleep, thanks to your essences, because I sleep very well. It's just, I don't even think about it anymore. So I can see what the struggle is. Do you have a favourite essence? Is there one that's is that your sort of, do you have a go-to essence, or is that like a secret?
It's one of those questions that people, when I was a florist, people used to ask me what my favourite flower was, and they asked me what my favourite essence is, and it changes all the time depending on what I need. There are a few that are my go-to, and with most people their go-to essences. If some people I've been seeing for 10 years with consultations, making up their own blends and looking through their records, there are definite essences that they never come up. And definite ones that kind of repeat patterns. And obviously if we've got an old pattern that we've had since childhood, it's quite easy to slip back into that habit, to kind of just go back into where it's where you feel comfortable, it's easy. But I'm a big fan of the Sexy and Gorgeous blend is one of my favourite blends, I must say, and that's got an essence in it that's called Potentilla, and it's one of those essences that everyone could you know, you don't have to have anything wrong with you. Again, that's the other thing with essences. Most people come to essences when they have got something wrong in their lives. Yeah. Not necessarily wrong with them, but something's happened, someone's died, or like me, that, you know, I wasn't coping with life. But then it's like they can just be, again, like going out with nice friends. They can just be like, make life better, you know. And the little potentilla flower, she's so lovely. And just makes you feel really great about yourself, not in a shouty, I'm fabulous way, but just like, it's all right, I know I'm all right, really. Yeah. And people with low self-esteem or who never felt attractive or whatever, it's just a really nice essence to take, and I do like that one. She's one of my favourites because she changed how I felt about myself. It was probably quite a turning point. And they're just little jiggles. You know, sometimes just a little, like a ripple, a little jiggle can just really just shift you back on track. So again, that bringing you back on track to who you really are, reminding you, you know, all that the chatter in the background about not being attractive enough or being too fat or too thin or too this or too that you've had, you know, your whole life often, or you've heard it. And it doesn't necessarily, you know, sometimes it's imaginary, but those thought patterns build up, and it isn't who you really are. So if you can take an essence that just like shifts you on from that. Yes, I must say potentilla and the wild garlic, because it's just so useful. That's another one.
Wild garlic useful?
Wild garlic's one of those really useful essences in it. It's got this kind of earth-air connection. It kind of goes up out into the universe, and it's really good for fear, that kind of, not fear of vampires, but that kind of that scared thing. It helps remind you that the beings out there have got your back. So whether that's angels or God or great spirit or whoever it is you believe, your dead granny or whoever it is, they're the unseen beings that are looking after us all the time. And I think I probably had it's interesting when you talk about your own story, because then you kind of go, okay, why did I do that? Or how did that happen? And I must say I've always felt that there is a bigger plan, that I have got this spiritual connection, which we all have. It's not me being special or anything, but I've felt that. Not that I had a desperately religious background or anything, but yeah, it's wild garlic's just great for not being scared, of knowing that you're not alone. You know, it's really good for kids who have nightmares in the middle of the night, who wake up with that kind of like absolutely terrified thing, and adults. But just the knowing that we're just not always alone, even if we feel it.
Definitely sold two to me tonight. But Sexy Gorgeous and wild garlic. I'm
Sexy and Gorgeous.
Heading over there the minute we're finished.
Everyone needs the Sexy and Gorgeous. It's
100%.
I love it.
Really. Before we go to questions, because I'm sure there's questions, but you know, there's a very considering it's such a, you know, Stroud is where you sort of come from, and it's known for this very sort of hippy-dippy take on stuff, you know what I mean? I hate saying that word. Yeah. But, you know, we talk about rituals that you know, just having an essence and spraying every day can become a ritual. But do you have any, before you go to, you know, some of our makers, before they make jewellery or before they go to pottery, they have certain rituals they do to sort of clear the energy and be that one of it. Do you have anything like that, or do you not have anything like that? Saskia, I knew the answer, sorry. And I knew that that's just not that's not your practice, is it? No.
No. And again, you know, my dad was vegetarian and stuff, and I don't know why, but people always assume I'm vegetarian, or they assume I do yoga, or they assume I do meditation, and really I don't.
No,
I don't. No, I don't. And again, with each essence, you know, maybe some people will come with questions, but with each essence that you make, it's a completely different experience. Sometimes it's a really deep spiritual experience, and I feel, okay, I've got to, you know, I don't do smudging or anything, but I might use our clear and protect spray to kind of clear myself off energetically or whatever. And over the years, my essence making process has changed, but each flower will be completely different. And I think sometimes I don't have rituals. No, I think we just say no. I don't. Yeah. I don't do.
Sexy and Gorgeous and Wild and Garlic. That's where it stops.
No, it is every time it's completely different. And
of course.
For the essence making, I think my memories, I kind of think, I should have done ritual, I should have done that thing, and I forgot.
Oops. Yeah. No, it's amazing.
No, I don't. Some people, it's very grounding, and obviously, rituals are great. but I haven't done them desperately.
Well, 20 years in, it doesn't really, I mean, you're proof that you don't need a ritual. This is the
No,
ritual. You're giving us all a ritual, I guess, to
Yeah.
sort of get up and get out every day or go to bed, would it be? Do you have any questions? Are there any questions that you'd like to ask?
What I've discovered, which someone pointed me out, on the same thing, is that if we ask what questions would you like to ask, you're much more likely to ask a question than would you like to ask any questions.
Okay,
apparently it's a thing.
Okay.
It's a language thing that apparently...
Say it again.
What questions would you like to ask?
What questions would you like to ask? Has that worked? I think you've answered everything.
I have not. There's a million things.
What I'm going to ask is, it's completely intuitive what you do with the flowers, isn't it? Whereby you kind of just, they speak to you and sort of say,
yeah.
You get that sort of...
Yes, but again, like it's completely intuitive when you walk into an empty room and you go, who do I want to talk to? You know, there might be people you know, but if you didn't know anyone, it's like if I look at you, which person am I most attracted to? And that's often a mirror of who we are and what parts we want to.
So is there any plant that you would stay away from if plants attract you?
Oh, that's a great question.
Plants that you
Yeah.
look at and think, no, I'm not giving
Yeah.
anybody time.
Yeah. Well, no, because they've all got lessons to teach you, and what I have discovered over the years is the ones that you don't like have got the best lessons. Again, like the humans you don't get on with, they're gonna trigger you most, and they're gonna bring like your stuff to the surface. So if there are plants that you don't like, I would recommend taking the essence of that plant. And it's interesting that I, again, being a gardener for a long time, I'd go into people's gardens and they'd have a real thing about one particular weed. And their whole gardens were full of weeds. They all needed weeding, but they'd have a thing about one particular one, and it would really bug them. And they'd come back, I know I'd have weeded, and they go, oh, you've left one of these things. And I, all right, I might have left one or two, but they were really obsessed with it. And it always fascinated me why that was. Before I got into essences, that was probably. But yeah, the ones you don't like are really interesting. But yeah, intuitively, but again, it's like once you know a bit about each essence, deciding what either ones that might go together to make the blends, but also what ones might suit someone, is a bit like a dating agency, is that you've got information about that person and that plant and you think they might get on well, or they've got you come with an issue and I go, okay, well this one usually helps people with that thing. But there will just be something that will go, you'll suddenly get a name of a flower in the back of your head and you suddenly go, why am I thinking about dandelion or whatever? And I've learned to say that, because often that's the one. And again, like couples or friends or whatever, there's just something that there'll be a connection, and you don't necessarily know that connection is, but so for me it's a bit like being a dating agency. It's like I'm just joining the plants with the right humans. I'm not actually being a healer, or it feels like they're coming through me and they're.
But I haven't quite understood. How do you then find out? So you're walking through a field of flowers, and there are some of the flowers in that field that you haven't worked with before. So are they speaking to you? Are they telling you, oh, this pink one over there would be really good for like fear or
Yeah.
How does it initially?
Yeah, well, what was quite interesting with our journey is that I was doing it with someone else. So once we'd made our first lesson, it worked, we went out and we were drawn to different plants. So that thing where you say suddenly there's a pink one over there that you'd never noticed before, and you kind of just clock it, but you might notice that plant somewhere else, and that's happened to me with a few of the essences I've made. Not in general, we only made essences that we were drawn to make for our own kind of journey, and I think probably Edward Bach was too, which is why there's kind of gaps in his range, I think. But yes, going back to that, so it's yes, now I've got enough essences, I have to do the opposite of like, I'm not going to make an essence from that, I don't need to make another one, I've got enough. But when we first started, you'd be like, oh, I wonder what that one's for, what's that one going to help with? And it would be an initial attraction, a bit like, again, like a relationship, an initial attraction, and then noticing it again, and then going in deeper, and then deciding to make the essence, and then there's quite a lot of clues on. So if no one's ever made that essence before, now we've got Google, so you can find out what someone else has made that essence for, and there's quite a lot of essence producers worldwide now. So there's quite a lot of information. So if there's a plant, you can Google flower essence, and that would be their explanation of it. of that plant, and there might have been different aspects that that plant would bring out, and if you used it. So you've got clues, as again, like humans, you've got clues, you've got the colour of the plant and the name of the plant and where it likes living and how it grows, and whether it's, you know, got soft, delicate stems, or whether it's got brittle roots, or whether it likes, you know, oak trees like living on their own with lots of space in a bit of field. So you've got those clues, and then you've got the herbal uses, when often the physical and the emotional kind of tie up. And then you've got the using it and the trialing it. And that's where it takes quite a lot of time sometimes. Sometimes they're quite obvious. You know, some plants are really obvious. Like if you think of dandelions, you've got that root and you've got the shininess and you get quite a lot of clues straight away. And some are still puzzling me. And some are bringing out new aspects. And they go out to trial, people come back with information about how they did like the first one when we sent it out to people. And there are certain people they know what they're looking for when they're taking an essence. But then just information just builds up and builds up and builds up, and you end up with, you know, like 20 years on quite a good picture. But again, they still surprise you. You know, someone I use a pendulum a lot to find out what essences people need in consultations, which is a way of kind of tuning into your intuition. And someone who's quite sensitive has been having a problem recently, and we've been having quite an email exchange, so I feel like I know her quite well now. And she emailed me and said, what I'd really like an essence for is an essence for wholeness. And have you got anything in your range you think might suit for that? And so I kind of thought, I don't know really. So anyway, nothing really kind of jumped out at me. So I thought I'll get my pendulum out and see if anything comes up. And wild carrot came up, which is one of my hydrosol essences, but we do make a carrot flower essence too. And that was a complete surprise. But I went with it, and I've sent it to her, and I'm going to see what she comes back with and whether it helps. But that's after having, you know, that's maybe 15 years later, that bit of information, that might be really good for, it's got this kind of connection to the earth, and then it's got an umbel, sort of flower, so it's kind of got that heaven to earth connection, but yeah, continual extra information all the time.
It's a lovely trust that you have with your customers, and I know it works. Before I met you, sort of things. I mean, no, it works. I felt the difference immediately. But that thing of, like, you know, you go to the doctor, you get your prescription. If it doesn't work, your antibiotics, you go back. So it doesn't work. It's the wrong one. You get the guy goes, sorry, you know, it's again, you know, sometimes it doesn't. But it is this trial and error, this sort of relationship that you're building. It's like all of you are in it together. So that doesn't work. Let's find something else. And it's a lovely.
And I think it's the aspect of the essences too, that they are very gentle, and they are, you know, they're made from plants. So they've got that, you know, if we're talking about plant energy, they've got that softness about them, and the completeness, which often chemicals you get from the doctors are the one unit of a plant. Most medicine comes from plants on some level, but they've like isolated the chemical, but it hasn't got all the other healing properties, and it certainly hasn't got the energetics. I mean, a good herbalist will make their own tinctures and stuff, and they will hold the energy of that plant too. But I think, in society in general, we're so used to being told what to do, you know, go to the doctor and they'll give you the right medicine and you'll be cured. And that kind of, you know, here you are, here's your drops, take them 7 drops twice a day, and it will sort that problem out. And unfortunately, or fortunately, with essences, you can't really say that, because they won't. I did a talk for the WI recently, and there was a woman, you know, with general public, you never know who you're talking to, you know, who people are. But this woman suddenly asked a question and said, have you ever tried doing double-blind studies? And I was like, okay, right, we'll get into the kind of science then. And she said, well, you know, when you made your first essence that you handed out to everyone, you could have like given some people blank bottles and some people not, and seen which worked and which didn't. And I said, well, that would have been all right if it had been a physical problem that everyone had, or they all had the same emotional issue. You could have gone, okay, you guys all can't sleep. I'll give some that work and see what happens. I said, but they wouldn't all needed that essence. You know, so you wouldn't have got that result. There's no way of getting that result. You know, we're not machines. You know, we are human beings which have got, you know, someone came in today actually into the shop and we were talking about it. They'd been through a long, they were in the middle of a cancer journey, really, quite a full-on medical experience he's been having, you know, and and I said, he agreed, you know, you have to you are a machine. When you go in there, you are a body. You know, they are fixing your body. Like when you take the car to the mechanics, it's not like this is a whole being with emotions and a spiritual experience, and you know, it's
That's
we
very
just, you
interesting.
know, it's, and that's where the essences come in is that they acknowledge that, and they help with all those levels, you know, from right out there, right in, and then if you can shift those levels, then your physical being will be much happier or healthier. Yeah.
Oh, that's very nice.
Can you take too many essences at once so they counteract?
Well, obviously, if you took one essence to calm you down and one essence to speed you up, that would be a problem. But again, it depends on the person. For me personally, if I'm again like, are you able to be in a room with 50 people and have all their energy around you for hours and hours and come back and feel all right? Some people that's fine, and for some people, you know, like me, I have to go and be at home for 3 days on my own if I've done a big social experience like that. And so some people I know, they take my blends. They'll take like one blend like now, and then they'll have a problem with the kids and they'll take another blend, and then before they go to bed they'll take another blend within 2 hours. And that, I really wouldn't recommend that, but for her it works. You know, for me, I would be overwhelmed with different information, so I usually recommend people leave a few hours between each essence. And a bit like a flower arrangement, if you take more than, like in our blends, there's kind of 7 or 8 single flowers in a blend. And if you have more than that, it gets a bit messy. It's like there isn't space for them to do their work properly. So it won't do you any harm if you take too many. You wouldn't have as good a result. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. What other questions we got?
Yeah,
I like questions. That's why I like having someone to talk to.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, okay.
No, it's fine. I love listening to it, and I do have, you know, personally, a million questions have come to my mind since today. I don't know, you know, all these different essences I want to try.
We kind of slid off my story, but I've got a bit bored of talking about my story.
Well, that's what I was going to say, actually, if there's anything from your personal story, because here we are today, you know, 20 years later, you have this incredible business with, I guess we could say, an international audience, really, isn't it? And your customers come from all over the world.
Yeah, again, they do. I've got a distributor in Hong Kong now, which is very, and again, it's been a bit, it is quite relevant in that we didn't finish that story off in that, so I needed the essences. We made our first essence, and again, we still didn't think, let's make a business of this. It was a really nice thing for me and Christine to do, and we liked doing it, and we couldn't afford to give them out to everyone all the time for free, so we kind of went, I suppose we better sell them. And then we had quite a few, and it was a nice thing for us to do. We'd have an excuse to go off for the weekend without the kids, or we'd meet together and, you know, discuss label design or leaflets or whatever, and it pushed us in loads of different directions. But it never ever, it never cost us any money, but it never made us any money either. Every year it was like our accounts would match up almost identically, so we never ever took any money out of the business. And so it got to a point where I moved down here, and she was very creative, so she's moved into like printmaking and art and stuff. And I moved down to Somerset, not down to here, down to Somerset from Gloucestershire, so practically. And I was much more keen on doing the kind of officey stuff and replying to emails and getting them in the post and that kind of stuff. So slowly I took more and more of it on. And then I had an opportunity not to have to earn so much money, and the job that I was doing at the time, gardening job and various other things, I wasn't so happy in that job anymore. So I thought, well, maybe I either have to give her the essences up or just go for it. And so I just went for it, and that was about 5 years ago. So I read it, you know, like you do when you haven't got any money. Again, probably like lots of your craftspeople. It's like I just learned all the programs. I did all the design for the labels. Well, I had, you know, friends, you know, ideas and inputs, but I had to rebuild the website. Did all the, you know, do all the social media. Anyway, so I just did it all and learned all those things that you have to learn and do all your accounts and do all your everything. Again, not moaning. I was doing what I love, and it was. But what it was like having a boyfriend and moving in with them, and the difference that is. It was like they've been a kind of side hustle for a long time, so I'd got to know them quite well, the different essences. But doing it full time has really tuned me right into knowing them and meeting people and having conversations all the time, and that's what I talk about this all the time. And so I've got right in there now. You know, it's taken me that long, but. And obviously, like all things, the deeper you go in, the more you realise there is to learn, and it's probably lifetimes of learning, really. But yeah, I'm getting to a stage now, and obviously with social media and just keeping on at the same thing all the time, and the pandemic as well, lots of people were really needing the essences, and they were all at home on their phones doing stuff. So it's just slowly really taken off.
Amazing.
And now it's doing well. Not we're doing well. Yeah, I say we, as it's me and the flowers mostly. But and I have someone to help me in the packing station and in the shop sometimes, so I can have days off. But yeah.
Is there a what's next for Saskia Essences? Just discovering more new flowers.
Again, it's, you've heard my story. It's like, what's next? Who knows?
Who knows? Who knows?
What I'm really good at, which is quite interesting, but people might find it interesting. What I'm quite good at is not knowing what's coming next, but knowing when something isn't right, and and if someone says, "Do you want to do this?" me saying yes, or I know straight away it's a no. Someone rang me up today, and I was just like, "No, I'm really not interested in that," and I knew straight away. So I do believe there is the path is out there. I just don't know where it's going. So we'll see.
I think the best bit for me, just to sort of finish it off, I mean, and I'm sure everyone else here, is just hearing your story. It's not just incredibly inspirational because of the end product, and being able to sort of use it and shop it and buy it and trial it is major. It's been really sort of, well, it is life-changing. It's a life-changing experience. I mean, I can say that from somebody who,
they really are,
has nothing invested in that world or interest really. I mean, it's been quite a game changer. But also hearing your story is so lovely because it really it's so fluid and lovely, and everything just sort of, I'm not going to say falls into place. I know it's probably been difficult at times, and relationships, children, but everything's, you've just allowed your path to kind of happen, and I feel that people can really block their own sort of destiny sometimes, and this has just been such a lovely story to hear from working with you at Vigour and Skills, and getting to know you now for this. It's well, you're just, it's a lovely story. It's
Thank
really
you.
lovely. And thank you for coming. Thank everyone here for coming. Thank you so much. Hope it wasn't too cold. And I know that the Yard are now doing some yummy, it's drinks, isn't it? What are the cocktails tonight, isn't there? Cocktails and pizza for anyone that wants to warm up by the fire. Yes, of course.
Oh, yes.
Yes. All the rest of our makers are upstairs. Not all of them personally, but their collections.
They're all waiting there.
Next door. Yeah, exactly. Single file. No kidding. Their collections are upstairs if you'd like to check it out tonight or tomorrow. But yeah, that was it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Saskia. Thank you.
My pleasure.